Techies and welcome back. I'm your instructor Sambhav. Today we're going to talk about Proc Print, a very commonly used procedure. To simplify the study of Proc Print, I have actually divided it into several sessions, and this is the first session of Proc Print. If you have not subscribed my channel yet, then please don't forget to subscribe and like my channel. Also hit the bell icon to get the updates on my latest video. So let's get started. So in this video, we're going to talk about Proc Print, what it does, and then we'll discuss the syntax of it, what are the different options available with Proc Print, and then finally, we will do some practicals so that we can understand the concept better. I'm sure all of you have used Proc Print sometimes or the other, and you all are aware of the fact that Proc Print is mainly used to display or print the result or print the observations and the variables. That is, you basically use to print the data set. So this is a syntax of Proc Print, guys. So as I've told you earlier that Proc Print is mainly used to print the data set. Now we know that every procedure in SAS will always start with the keyword proc followed by the procedure name. So in this example or in this scenario we are using print, so we'll be using print, and then the next element of this syntax is the data statement, which is mainly used to instruct SAS that which data set we are going to print. Here I have mentioned EDSN, basically means existing data set name. So whatever data is already existing, we want to print that. Followed by that, we have a few options in Proc Print where there are basically 6 options. And then we have several statements like var, sum, id, by, where, label, title, footnote, run. So we'll discuss all of these statements with examples, but we'll not be able to cover all of them in this video. So let's try to cover as much as possible, right? Now guys, I know that this syntax looks pretty lengthy, but don't you worry about it. At the end of the Proc Print session, I will give you a very interesting trick to memorize or remember the syntax of Proc Print very easily. And trust me, you are not going to forget any element of this entire syntax, whether it is option, whether it is the statements. You will remember them very easily, and you will remember all of them, right? So now another interesting fact about the Proc Print syntax is that if you do not use these many selected or these many parts or these many elements of the Proc Print syntax, still Proc Print works fine. That means the only element required for Proc Print to work successfully is Proc Print. You must be wondering, do we really don't need to specify the data is equal to existing data set name? And if we don't specify that, what data set SAS is going to print? We'll see that shortly. So as I told you that this Proc Print statement only requires Proc Print, and if you do not use even the data option, by default SAS will print the most recently created data set. Most recently created data set may not be most recently used. Please don't be confused with most recently created and most recently used. Most recently created data set may not necessarily be the most recently used. Let us take an example. Oh, I have already a few of them. So let me print it. Proc print data is equal to SAS.class run. Let's execute the code and see the result. So you know that SAS will just print the data set. So here what we have done, we have used the keyword proc to tell SAS that hey, we are going to use a proc step, and then followed by the name of the procedure. Then we've used the data statement to instruct SAS that which data set we are going to print. So in this case, we are going to print the class data set which belongs to the SAS library, right? Now I told you that it is not mandatory for us to use this statement. So what will happen if we don't use it? As I told you earlier that if you do not specify this option or this element or this portion of the syntax, SAS will actually print the most recently created data set, which may not necessarily be the most recently used. Let us do a practical to understand that better. So I'm going to sort a data set. Proc sort data is equal to SAS help.class, and I'm going to store the sorted result in another data set called as class_1. and we'll sort the data set based on sex, run, and we will try to print the sorted data, class underscore 1, run. Now guys, if you have not studied sort, so I believe you know what sort will do. It is mainly used to sort the data set in ascending or descending order. And if you have not gone through my proc sort videos, which I have already uploaded, so please don't forget to check them out to understand what proc sort does. So in this case, if I execute the piece of code, what SAS will do is it will sort my SAS.class dataset and based on the sex variable. So you will notice that all the female values will appear on the first and male values appear at the bottom. So in this piece of code, what we are actually doing is we are sorting a data set called as SAS.class, and we are creating a new data set called as class underscore 1. So this is a newly created data set. Now what I'm going to do is let me print another data set called as SAS.shoes, right? Now, if I execute this piece of code, as usual, SAS will print the SAS.class dataset, shoes dataset. Shoes is another dataset which belongs to the SAS library. Now, what will happen if I just type proc print run? So in this situation, which dataset is going to be printed? SAS.class or SAS.shoes or SAS class underscore 1? Definitely class underscore 1, because this is the most recently created dataset. In fact, this is the only created dataset we have. This is the only dataset which I have created here, and it is the most recent one. So SAS is going to print class underscore 1, which is a sorted dataset based on the sex variable. So I hope you're clear what will happen if we do not use the data option here, which is really very important for you to understand. Now we'll talk about the options of proc print. So there are basically 6 options we have: N, no OBS, first OBS, double, label, OBS. Let us drill down and try to understand each one of these options. The first one is N. This option is mainly used to display the total number of observations or the total number of records in the dataset at the bottom of the result. So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at this particular result, so this has SAS has actually printed the result. There are 19 observations, and we know it because we have something called as observation column. Now if you want to print the total number of observations available in this data set, we use the option N. So N is mainly used to print the total number of observations or the total number of records in the data set, and this result will be printed here at the bottom. Let's do a practical. Proc print data is equal to SAS.class, and let me use N, run. Now if I execute this piece of code, you will notice that SAS has actually printed total number of observations at the end of the result, end of the data set, right? Another interesting feature about this is that if you want, you can actually print a customized message here. How can we do it? So now what I'll do is N is equal to, let's say I want to print total students is equal to. Now if I execute, now if I execute this piece of code, you will notice that SAS is actually printing the message total in underscore students at the bottom of the data sets, and will give you the count of it, right? I have used equal to sign because I wanted equal to sign also to be printed there. All right. The next option is no OBS. Now if you notice the result, by default SAS will always add a new observation called as OBS observation. Right, OBS, which basically gives you the observation number, first observation, second, third, fourth, and so on and so forth. Now this is a default option of SAS. Now what if I don't want the OBS column? I don't want this OBS variable. If you don't want it, just write no OBS. Hey SAS, don't print the OBS observation. So let's try that. Proc print data is equal to SAS.class, and now I'll give no OBS run. So now if I try to execute this code, you will notice that SAS has actually removed the observation column, right? Now guys, you can use multiple options together. Let's say for example, I want to use N. Let me copy this part. So now if I execute it, there won't be any observation column, and at the end SAS will give us the count of total observations. So you can use multiple observations together. The third option is double. So this option is mainly used to add a space between each of the observation. This option is mainly used to skip one row between the observation. Basically it prints the observation with one line of gap. So what it will do is when I am going to use the double statement, double option, SAS will actually add gap, one row of gap between these two observations. So let's try that. Proc print data is equal to SAS dot class, and then we'll use double, right? Now guys, you may not be able to notice the result here because in University Edition the result is not evident. It is just showing the same result what we have been seeing earlier. But if you try in actual SAS, in the output window you will notice that there is a space. There's nothing wrong in the code. The only thing is that it is not printing here. It is not showing that result. This result will be very much clear, evident in the SAS in the output window, not in the University Edition, right? Then the next one is the labels. This option is used to display labels defined for the variables. It means that if you want to add some labels for these variables, you can do that. For example, let's say I want to add a new label for this name, and I want to change it to be as name of students or name underscore students. Let's say for example we have a variable called as height. So let's assume that I want to change I want to add a new label to it called as height in centimeters. So how are we going to do that? In order to do that, we will use the option label. Let's do that. Proc print data is equal to SAS dot class and labels, right? Sorry, label, label. Now guys, there's a small difference between using the other options like NOOBS, double and all with label. The difference is you will have to specify label here in the first statement and also in the second line. That means in the second line. After that, you'll just specify the name of the variable for which you want to add a label. So let's say for example I want to add a new label for name, so I'll give name and equal to, then you specify the label which you want to give. Let's say name underscore student, right? And then let's say I want to add another label for height, and I want to add it as height in CMS, centimeters, and then let me add one more label for weight, which is weight in pound. Okay, I made a mistake. You shouldn't be adding a semicolon over there. Semicolon is supposed to be added here because here we are ending the label statement, and then if we execute the code, we will see the result and we'll have three labels added: name of student, height in centimeters, and weight in pounds. So I hope you are clear with what a label statement is. Now the next two interesting options available is FIRSTOBS and OBS. FIRSTOBS is equal to what? So what this FIRSTOBS will do is it will actually print the result from some particular observation, let's say M. So it will print the result from the mth observation. Let's say for example, in general when we are printing the result, SAS actually starts printing the observations, printing the output data from the first observation. Let us assume I want to start printing my result from the 10th observation. That means 10th should be my first observation, John, male 12, right? So in that situation, what I'll do is I will give proc print data is equal to SAS.class, and then I will add first OBS is equal to 10. Now once I execute this code, it will not work. It will throw an error. Now I'm knowingly doing it so that you won't make the mistake. So it says first OBS syntax expecting one of the following blah blah blah. It is actually expecting a bracket. So this option must be specified inside the bracket. So now if I execute this piece of code, SAS will actually start printing the data set from the 10th observation till the end, right? Similarly, if I want to print let's say the last two, so I will give 17 and I will execute this piece of code. So it will print 17th, 18th, 19th. So it will print 3 observations, right? As I told you earlier, you can use multiple options. Let's say I want to use NOOBS, and so on and so forth. So you will notice all these options work fine. So it will say 3 and there is no observation column over here, right? Now, in this example, I have told you that if you want to print the observation from mth column, starting from mth column, let's say for example, just let me print the data set. Let me print this data set. So I have been telling you that what if you want to print the data set from the 10th observation, from the 17th observation, and so on and so forth. So you are defining the starting observation number, that is your first OBS, right? Now, what if I tell you that I want to print up to 10th observation? That means starting from 1st till 10th. So in the previous example, I have told from where to start printing, but in this example, I am telling you till where to print. So from 1 to let's say 5 observations. I only want to print the first 5 observation. So for that, you will be using another option called as OBS. So OBS will actually print the result from starting till the nth observation. So let's do that and check the result. So let's say I want to print first 5 observations. So what I'll do is I will give OBS is equal to 5. So what SAS will do is it will only print the first 5 observation, right? See, 1 to 5. Now another interesting thing about this first OBS and OBS is that, guys, it will help you actually to print the observations starting from any observation number and ending. That means you can print any observation. Let's say for example, I want to print from 5th to 10th. So what I'll have to give, I will have to give a starting point that from which observation I want to print. So that will be the OBS is equal to 5, and then I will have to give till where I have to print. That means OBS is equal to 10. So I can use them together to print a range of observations. So proc print data is equal to SAS.class, and inside the bracket I will specify first OBS is equal to 5, and let's say okay, let me not make it complicated, and then I will write OBS is equal to 10, right? Run. Now if I execute this piece of code, SAS should give me the result, and you see we have got it from 5th observation to the 10th observation. And as I have told you earlier, you can use other options as well. Let's say NOOBS and so on and so forth. You can use multiple options in the proc print statement. See, we have got the result. So I hope you are clear with all the options which is being used in proc print, which is N, which will print the total number of observations at the end of the data set. No OBS, which will actually ask SAS not to print the observation column, which is the default column of SAS. Then the double to add 1 row of gap between each of the observations. Labels to change the label of the variables. Now guys, when you're changing the labels of the variables, let's say for example here, changing the labels of the variable, now it does not mean that you're actually changing the variable names. You're just adding a label to it. Then we have already discussed first OBS and OBS. Thank you for now, guys. You have a wonderful day ahead. And also please let me know the list of topics which you want me to discuss. And please don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you so much for your time, and you have a wonderful day ahead.